Clara Ashbourne knew the
I'm
gown
so
was ruined the
sorry,
moment her
Clara.
sisters smiled.
It seems quite
Not
ruined.
politely. Not kindly. Triumphantly. Beatrice held it up as though presenting a royal treasure, while Lydia pressed a hand to her mouth to hide a laugh. "This is for you," Beatrice said. "For the Duke of Ravenshire's ball." Clara's breath caught. For one foolish second, hope rose in her chest. The Duke's ball was the grandest event of the season. Every unmarried lady in the county had dreamed of stepping beneath those chandeliers, of being seen, admired, chosen. And Clara had not expected to go at all. "You mean it?" she asked softly. Lydia tilted her head. "Of course. We could not let our dear little sister stay home like a servant." That was when Clara saw the silk. It had once been pale blue, perhaps beautiful years ago. Now it was faded almost grey. The hem hung unevenly. One sleeve was looser than the other. Tiny tears had been hidden beneath cheap lace. Then Clara saw the worst part. The stitching at the waist had been deliberately loosened. If she moved too quickly, bent too low, or danced too long, the gown would split. Her face went cold. Beatrice watched her notice. "Oh dear," she said. "Is something wrong?" Clara touched the damaged seam with trembling fingers. "This cannot be worn." "Nonsense," Lydia said. "In candlelight, no one will notice. But the stitching. Then do not breathe too deeply." Both sisters laughed. Clara looked from one face to the other, and the truth settled heavily inside her. This was not a gift. It was a trap. They wanted her at the ball. They wanted witnesses. They wanted her humiliation to happen in front of every noble family in the county. Beatrice stepped closer and lowered her voice. "You should be grateful. Father cannot afford another gown, and we are giving you a chance to stand in the same room as the Duke." Lydia smiled. "Not that he will look at you." Clara swallowed, but the tears burned anyway. Beatrice reached out and brushed a thread from the ruined bodice. "Honestly, Clara, you must understand your place. Some women are chosen. Some are merely present." Then Lydia delivered the blow. No duke looks twice at a girl no one ever chooses first. The room went silent. Clara wanted to answer. She wanted to throw the gown at their feet. But downstairs, their father's voice called for them to hurry. The carriage was waiting. Beatrice pushed the gown into Clara's arms. "Come along, little sister," she whispered. "Let us see how long your dignity lasts tonight." And Clara realized the ball had not even begun. But her ruin already had. Ashbourne House had once known music. Clara remembered it faintly. Her mother laughing in the morning room. Fresh flowers on the table. Warm hands fixing ribbons in Clara's hair. A voice telling her that kindness was not weakness, even when cruel people mistook it for one. Then her mother died. And warmth left with her. Now the house felt like a place people endured, not lived in. Her father, Lord Ashbourne, spent most days locked in his study with unpaid bills, sealed letters, and creditors' warnings spread before him. He rarely shouted. That might have been easier. Instead, he looked through Clara as though she were another debt he could not settle. Beatrice and Lydia blamed Clara for everything. For their mother's affection. For their father's silence. For the shrinking fortune that made every ball feel less like pleasure and more like a marketplace. Marriage was no longer romance to them. It was escape. That morning, while her sisters argued over pearls and gloves, Clara sat in the servants' passage with a needle between her fingers, trying to repair the ruined gown enough to survive one evening. The seam had not merely come loose. It had been cut. She stared at it, heart sinking. "Miss Clara?" A maid named Elsie stood nearby, holding a torn apron. "I am sorry to trouble you." Clara immediately hid her own gown beneath a shawl. "Come here. Let me see." Elsie's eyes widened. "But you are dressing for the ball. And you are trying not to be scolded by Mrs. Vale." Within minutes, Clara had mended the apron with neat, quick stitches. Elsie watched in admiration. "You sew better than the modiste in town." Clara smiled sadly. "Then perhaps one day I shall dress queens." "Or duchesses," Elsie said. Clara almost laughed. Upstairs, Lydia called sharply, "Clara, have you misplaced yourself again?" Elsie flinched. Clara squeezed her hand. "Go. And keep your apron away from kitchen hooks." When she returned to her room, Clara opened the small book hidden beneath her mattress. Inside were sketches. Gowns she could never afford. Sleeves shaped like petals. Bodices embroidered with vines. Evening dresses meant for women who entered rooms without fear. On the last page was a design for herself. Not grand. Not loud. But graceful. A gown for a woman who wished, just once, to be seen without being laughed at. She closed the book when footsteps approached. Beatrice entered without knocking. "You are still not ready." "I am nearly finished." Beatrice's gaze fell to the repaired seam. Her smile thinned. "How clever you are." Clara said nothing. Lydia appeared behind her. "Do not worry, sister. No amount of stitching can make that gown respectable." Beatrice leaned close. "And no amount of pretending can make you one of us." By sunset, every carriage road to Ravenshire Hall was crowded. Mothers adjusted their daughters' curls. Fathers calculated fortunes. Young ladies practiced smiles that looked innocent but carried ambition sharp as glass. All because Duke Alexander Ravenshire had returned to society. And he was still unmarried. That single fact had turned his winter ball into a battlefield. To the county, he was everything a gentleman should be. Wealthy. Powerful. Handsome. Untouchable. But to Alexander, the title felt less like privilege and more like a mask people bowed to while never seeing the man beneath it. Standing at the upper window of Ravenshire Hall, he watched guests arrive in glittering waves. His aunt, Lady Marwood, stood behind him. "You look as though you are attending your own execution." "I have attended dinners with less mercy." "You must dance tonight." "So I have been warned." "With eligible ladies." "I suspected you did not mean footmen." She sighed. "Alexander." He turned. Lady Marwood softened her voice. "You cannot avoid choosing forever." The Duke looked back toward the glowing entrance. "I do not object to marriage," he said. "I object to being hunted for it." Below, a young lady stepped from a carriage and immediately looked up toward the windows, searching. Another arrived and whispered to her mother while glancing at the grand doors. Every smile seemed rehearsed. Every blush, practiced. Every compliment, purchased in advance by hope. Lady Marwood followed his gaze. "Not all women are false." "No," he said quietly. "But most are taught to perform before they are allowed to speak." That silenced her. Alexander was not cruel, though many called him cold. He was observant. That was worse for those who relied on appearances. He noticed servants with tired hands. He noticed gentlemen laughing too loudly near wealthy widows. He noticed young ladies pushed forward by desperate mothers, fear hidden beneath powder and pearls. And he noticed loneliness. Because he knew it. His parents had died when he was young, leaving him with a title before he understood grief. Since then, everyone had wanted something from him. Influence. Money. Marriage. Security. Very few had wanted truth. A footman entered and bowed. "Your Grace, the first guests are assembled. Lady Marwood brightened. Come. Smile, choose a partner, and try not to terrify the county. Alexander gave a dry look. I make no promises. Yet as he descended the staircase, applause rippled through the hall. Faces turned. Fans lifted. Whispers followed. There he is. The Duke. Who will he dance with first? Alexander heard all of it. Then, near the side entrance, almost hidden behind two radiant young women, he saw another girl step inside. Her gown was faded. Her shoulders were stiff with shame. And unlike everyone else in the room, she was trying desperately not to be noticed. Clara knew people were staring before she reached the ballroom doors. Not admiring. Measuring. Judging. The footman announced, Lord Ashbourne, Miss Beatrice Ashbourne, Miss Lydia Ashbourne, and Miss Clara Ashbourne. A small pause followed her name. Small enough to deny. Sharp enough to wound. Beatrice entered first in rose silk. Lydia followed in gold. Together they shone beneath the candlelight like daughters from a family untouched by debt. Then Clara stepped forward. The ballroom seemed to brighten cruelly around her. Diamonds flashed. Satin glowed. Music floated from the orchestra balcony. And her own gown looked even worse than it had at home. The faded blue had turned dull beside the jewel-colored dresses. The lace patches did not hide the tears. The repaired waist pulled every time she breathed. Clara kept her chin raised. That only made the whispers begin faster. Is that the youngest Ashbourne girl? Poor thing. Did she borrow that from a maid? Lydia leaned close, smiling for the room. Do stand straight, Clara. Slouching makes the gown look even sadder. Beatrice touched Clara's sleeve as if comforting her, but her fingers pressed exactly where the fabric was weakest. Clara flinched. Across the room, two ladies noticed. One lifted her fan. The other laughed behind it. Clara's face burned. Her father had already moved toward a group of gentlemen, pretending not to see any of it. That hurt more than the whispers. Beatrice and Lydia guided Clara toward the edge of the ballroom, not near the finest families, but near the place where overlooked girls waited to be remembered. There, Beatrice said. A perfect position. For what? Clara asked. For watching. Lydia smiled. Surely you did not expect to dance. Before Clara could answer, a hush moved through the crowd. The Duke of Ravensshire had entered. Every woman seemed to become taller. Every mother became alert. Even Beatrice's smile sharpened. He descended the grand staircase in black evening dress, composed and unreadable. He did not hurry. He did not search eagerly. He moved like a man who knew every eye belonged to him and found no pleasure in it. He is magnificent, Lydia whispered. He is necessary, Beatrice murmured. Clara glanced at her. For the first time that night, she understood. Her sisters did not merely want admiration. They needed it. A duke's attention could save them from debt, shame, and fading prospects. And Clara, in her ruined gown, was meant to make them look brighter. Beatrice stepped forward, positioning herself where the Duke must see her. Lydia followed. Clara remained behind. Then a servant girl stumbled nearby, nearly dropping a tray of crystal glasses. The room held its breath. Clara moved without thinking and caught the tray. The glasses trembled. None fell. The servant whispered, "Thank you." Clara nodded. But across the ballroom, the Duke had seen everything. The servant girl looked terrified. One glass still trembled on the edge of the silver tray, ready to fall. Clara steadied it with 2 fingers before anyone else moved. "There," she whispered. "No harm done." The girl's face had gone pale. I shall be dismissed. Not if no one notices. But someone had noticed. The Duke of Ravensshire stood across the ballroom, watching with quiet interest. Clara did not see him. That interested him more. Every other young woman in the room had found some excuse to glance his way. A dropped fan. A softened laugh. A careful turn of the shoulder. But the girl in the faded gown was focused only on saving a servant from shame. Beatrice noticed the Duke looking. Her smile tightened. "Clara," she said sweetly, "must you always involve yourself with servants?" Several ladies nearby heard. Clara straightened. She nearly fell. "And now everyone knows you are useful," Lydia murmured. "How charming." The servant girl slipped away, grateful and unseen. Clara tried to step back into the shadows. But fate did not let her. Near the refreshment table, an elderly countess reached for her cane and missed. Her knees bent suddenly. Her companion gasped, but too late. Clara moved first. She caught the countess by the arm and guided her gently into a chair. The woman blinked up at her. "My dear, you have spared me a great embarrassment." Clara smiled. "Then we shall pretend nothing happened." The countess studied her face. "That is rarer kindness than you know." Across the room, the Duke heard enough. Lady Marwood leaned beside him. "You are staring." "I am observing." "That is what you call staring when you wish to sound dignified." His gaze stayed on Clara. "She has been mocked twice since entering," he said. "Yet she has rescued two people from embarrassment and asked for nothing." Lady Marwood followed his line of sight. "The Ashbourne girl. You know her." "Only by reputation." "Youngest daughter." "Quiet." "Poor prospects." "Poor prospects," he repeated. The phrase displeased him. At that moment, Beatrice stepped smoothly into his view, curtsied, and smiled as if the evening had been arranged for her triumph. "Your Grace." Alexander bowed. Beatrice waited for admiration. He gave courtesy instead. Behind her, Clara was helping the Countess adjust her shawl, unaware she had become more interesting than every diamond in the room. The orchestra lifted its first notes. The dancing was about to begin. Mothers leaned forward. Daughters held their breath. Everyone wondered whom the Duke would choose first. But Alexander was no longer looking at the brightest gowns. He was looking at the girl trying hardest to disappear. And Clara had no idea. The first set began without Clara. Of course it did. Beatrice danced with a viscount. Lydia accepted the hand of a wealthy baronet. Their smiles were bright enough to convince strangers they had never known worry. Clara remained near the staircase. Not hidden. Displayed. That was the cruelest part. Her sisters had placed her where everyone leaving the ballroom could see the damaged gown clearly. She folded her hands over the weakened seam and prayed the music would end quickly. Then Beatrice returned, flushed and pleased. "Still alone?" she asked. Clara said nothing. Lydia joined them moments later, laughing softly. "Perhaps someone will ask you out of Christian pity." Beatrice touched Clara's waist again. Too hard. Clara felt a stitch give. Her breath stopped. "Careful," she whispered. Beatrice's eyes widened with false innocence. "Did I hurt you?" Another stitch snapped. Then another. Clara stepped back, but her heel caught the bottom stair. The fabric pulled. A sharp ripping sound cut through the music. Not loud, but loud enough. The nearest guests turned. Clara froze. A tear had opened along the side of the gown, exposing the loosened lining beneath. Not indecent, but humiliating. Obvious. Ugly. Impossible to hide. For 1 second, No one spoke. Then someone laughed behind a fan. A gentleman muttered, "Good heavens." A young lady whispered, was she truly invited dressed like that? Heat rushed to Clara's face. She clutched the torn fabric with both hands. Beatrice gasped beautifully. "Clara! Your gown!" Lydia rushed forward with perfect concern and terrible delight in her eyes. "Oh, you poor thing! How dreadful!" Clara saw it then. They had been waiting for this. They had not wanted her merely embarrassed. They had wanted her broken in public. The Countess Clara had helped try to rise, but her companion held her back. The servant girl looked stricken from across the room. The whispers grew. Ashbourne must be ruined. No proper sister would allow this. She should leave before the Duke sees. That last sentence wounded most. Before the Duke sees. As if his notice would be another punishment. Clara turned toward the corridor. She would leave quietly. She would find a cloak. She would walk home if she had to. Anything was better than standing there while half the county watched her dignity unravel thread by thread. But Lydia caught her wrist. "Do not run," she whispered. "It makes you look guilty." Clara pulled free. Her voice shook. "Guilty of what?" Beatrice leaned close enough that only Clara could hear. "Of forgetting your place." Clara stared at her sisters. Then she looked at the glittering ballroom, the watching faces, the staircase before her. And for the first time that night, Clara truly wished she had never come. Clara took one step toward the corridor. Then the ballroom went quiet. Not gradually. All at once. The kind of silence that makes even cruelty pause. Clara thought someone had seen more of the torn gown. She tightened her grip on the fabric and lowered her head. But the whispers had changed. They were no longer aimed at her. They were following someone. The Duke of Ravensshire was crossing the ballroom. Every eligible lady straightened. Every mother stiffened. Beatrice's face transformed instantly from satisfaction to anticipation. Lydia released a breathless smile. He was coming in their direction. Of course he was. Beatrice stepped forward first, already preparing her curtsy. Lydia moved beside her, blocking Clara from view. But the Duke did not stop for either of them. He passed Beatrice. He passed Lydia. He passed the daughters in silk, the widows in diamonds, the mothers with fortunes in their eyes. And then he stopped in front of Clara. The silence deepened. Clara could not move. She stared at the polished floor, certain this must be some mistake. "Miss Ashbourne," he said. Her name in his voice sounded impossible. Slowly, she looked up. His expression was not amused. Not pitying. Not cruel. It was steady. "May I have the first dance?" A shock moved through the room. Someone actually gasped. Beatrice's lips parted. Lydia looked as though she had been slapped. Clara's heart pounded so hard she could barely hear the music waiting behind them. "Your Grace," she whispered, "you need not do this." His gaze sharpened slightly. "Do what?" "Be kind where everyone can see." For the first time, something like anger crossed his face. "Not at her. For her." Clara continued, voice breaking despite herself. "I know what this must look like. I know what they are saying. You need not attach your name to my embarrassment." The Duke glanced at the torn seam, then at the faces watching too eagerly. He understood more than Clara had meant to reveal. Without a word, he removed his evening coat. The room stirred. Then he placed it gently around Clara's shoulders, covering the damaged gown. A murmur swept through the ballroom. Beatrice whispered, "No." The Duke heard. He did not look at her. Instead, He offered Clara his hand. "Cruelty," he said clearly, "seems already abundant this evening. I see no reason to add mine." The words landed like a public verdict. Fans stopped moving. Eyes dropped. Even those who had laughed looked suddenly uncomfortable. Clara stared at his hand. Everything in her wanted to flee. But something in his face held her there. Not command. Not pity. Respect. With trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his. And the Duke led the ruined girl onto the ballroom floor first. The music began. Clara expected laughter to follow. It did not. No one dared. Not while the Duke of Ravensshire held her hand as though she were the most honored woman in the room. Still, Clara could feel every stare. The coat rested warm over her shoulders. The torn gown remained hidden, but not forgotten. Her humiliation had not vanished. It had simply gained a witness powerful enough to silence it. "You are shaking," the Duke said quietly. "I am trying not to step on you. That would be a refreshing scandal." Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. He noticed. "There," he said. "A victory. A very small one." Small victories are often the only honest kind. Clara looked up before she could stop herself. That was not the sort of thing a duke was supposed to say. He should have asked about the weather, her family, the music, safe things, empty things. Instead, he spoke as though he had noticed the world was not kind. "Why did you ask me?" she said. His answer came without hesitation. "Because before anyone else in this room thought to help, you did." Clara's throat tightened. "The servant girl. And the Countess. You saw that?" "I saw a great many things tonight." Her cheeks warmed again, but differently this time. Around them, the ballroom watched in stunned silence. Beatrice stood rigid near the staircase. Lydia's fan moved too quickly. Their plan had been simple. Make Clara look pitiful. Make themselves look radiant. Let society laugh at one sister and admire the others. But now every eye in the room was on Clara. And not with mockery. With curiosity. That frightened them more. "You should know," Clara said, "I did not come here hoping for this." "I know." "How?" "Because you were the only lady in the room trying not to be seen." The word struck too close. Clara looked away. "I have had practice." The Duke's voice softened. "That is not a skill one should have to learn." For a moment, she forgot the crowd. She forgot the torn gown. She forgot Beatrice and Lydia watching from the edge of the floor with envy sharpening their faces. She only heard the music and the calm certainty in his voice. Then he surprised her again. "Did you repair the gown yourself?" Clara stiffened. "I tried. The stitching near the sleeve is excellent." She blinked. "You noticed the stitching." "I notice effort." No one had ever said that to her. Not beauty. Not charm. Effort. The word nearly undid her. Clara lifted her chin, wounded pride returning just enough to protect her heart. "Careful, Your Grace. Complimenting a ruined gown may damage your reputation." His eyes warmed. "Then let them say I have finally shown taste." And for the first time that night, Clara laughed. By morning, the whole county knew Clara Ashbourne's name. But not kindly. At breakfast, Beatrice dropped the first newspaper beside Clara's plate with a smile too sweet to trust. "Congratulations," she said. "You are famous." Clara looked down. There was no name printed. Society columns were never that direct. But everyone would know. At last evening's Ravenshire ball, an obscure young lady in unfortunate attire secured the Duke's first dance under circumstances some guests describe as theatrical. Clara's stomach turned. Lydia leaned over her shoulder. Theatrical. How generous of them. I would have written desperate. Clara folded the paper. I did not ask him. No, Beatrice said. You merely tore your gown at the perfect moment. Clara stared at her. You know that is not true. Beatrice's smile vanished. What I know is that every lady in that room saw the Duke wrap his coat around you as though you were some tragic heroine. Lydia's voice sharpened. And now people are asking why he noticed you. That was the real crime. Not the ruined gown. Not the whispers. Not the humiliation. The crime was that Clara had been chosen first. Their father entered late, his face grey from another sleepless night. He barely touched his tea. Enough, he muttered. Clara looked up, hoping he meant to defend her. Instead, he pushed a letter across the table. Lord Pembroke has withdrawn his interest in Lydia. Lydia gasped. Beatrice went still. Their father's hand trembled. He says the Ashbourne name has become unstable. Clara's chest tightened. Because of me. No one answered. That silence was worse. Across the county, the Duke of Ravensshire was hearing a different version. Alexander stood in his library while his steward, Mr. Hale, reported what polite society had dressed in perfume and cruelty. The Ashbourne estate is heavily indebted, Your Grace. Several creditors are pressing hard. Lord Ashbourne has delayed payment twice. Alexander's jaw tightened. And the sisters? Expected to marry well. Quickly. So the ball was not only vanity. No, Your Grace. It was survival. Alexander looked toward the window. Survival could make people desperate. But desperation did not excuse cruelty. Mr. Hale hesitated. There is more. Some guests claim Miss Clara arranged the scene to gain your sympathy. Alexander turned slowly. Do you believe that? No, Your Grace. Why not? Because a woman planning to trap a duke does not try to leave before he reaches her. Alexander said nothing for a moment. Then he reached for the coat Clara had returned before leaving the ball. Folded neatly. Cleaned carefully. As though she feared owing him even gratitude. She thinks she embarrassed me, he said. That evening, Clara heard two ladies whispering outside the milliner's shop. She must have planned it. Poor Duke. Men are easily caught by tears. And that gown? Honestly, no respectable family would allow it unless there was a scheme. Clara stepped back before they saw her. Her hands went cold. So this was what his kindness had become. A scandal tied around his name. By nightfall, Clara sat beside her window with her sketchbook unopened. For one impossible evening, she had felt seen. Now she feared she had only made herself dangerous to the one person who had shown her mercy. And downstairs, Beatrice was telling visitors that Clara had always been cleverer than she looked. Clara lasted 3 more days. 3 days of whispers. 3 days of visitors arriving with sympathy in their voices and hunger in their eyes. 3 days of Beatrice and Lydia watching her as though she had stolen bread from their hands. Then came the final wound. She was crossing the hallway when she heard her father speaking behind the study door. The Duke's attention has made everything worse, Lord Ashbourne said. Creditors think we are angling higher than we deserve. Suitors hesitate. My daughter's futures are collapsing. A male voice answered, then send the youngest away for a while. Let the gossip cool. Clara froze. Her father did not protest. He sighed. That may be best. Not once did he ask if she had been hurt. Not once did he say she was innocent. Clara stepped back before the floorboard creaked. That night, she packed quietly. Not jewels. She had none. Not fine dresses. She had never owned them. She packed her sketchbook, her mother's ribbon, and the ruined gown folded beneath tissue. She did not know why she took it. Perhaps because leaving it behind felt like letting them decide what it meant. Before dawn, she rode with a maid to the family's old country estate, a smaller property half forgotten and poorly kept. No one would look for her there first. At least, that was what she told herself. By afternoon, the Duke arrived at Ashbourne House. Beatrice nearly ran down the stairs when his carriage appeared. Lydia followed, pinching colour into her cheeks. Their father rushed from the study, suddenly alert. But when Alexander entered, he did not ask for either sister. "I wish to speak with Miss Clara Ashbourne." The room changed. Beatrice's smile cracked. "Clara is unwell." "Then I shall wait." Lydia stepped forward. "She has gone to rest in the country, Your Grace." She was terribly overwhelmed by the attention. Alexander looked at her. Was she? Lydia lowered her eyes. Beatrice tried to recover. "My sister is delicate. She often mistakes kindness for attachment." The Duke's voice cooled. "And cruelty for sisterhood." No one breathed. Lord Ashbourne cleared his throat. "Your Grace, Clara has caused confusion." "She is young, Anne." "She caused nothing," Alexander said. "She endured much." The words struck the room like a door slamming shut. Beatrice's face flushed. But Clara was not there to hear them. At the country estate, she stood in the neglected garden, staring at dead rose canes and weeds climbing the stone path. The silence should have comforted her. Instead, it made room for every doubt. Perhaps the Duke had only acted from impulse. Perhaps he had regretted it the moment society began talking. Perhaps his coat, his dance, his gentle words had been nothing more than a nobleman's brief rebellion against boredom. Clara opened her sketchbook but could not draw. Every line turned into the ballroom. Every shadow became a watching face. Every blank page asked the same question. Had he truly seen her? Or had she only imagined it because she needed to? By evening, rain began to fall. Clara stood beneath the garden arch and whispered what she had not dared say aloud. "It is better this way." But her voice broke on the last word. Because walking away had not saved her heart. It had only proved how much she had already given it. The Duke came the next morning. Clara saw the carriage from the upstairs window and nearly dropped her tea. For one wild second, she thought she had imagined him. But no. Alexander Ravenshire stepped down into the muddy drive as though neglected country houses received dukes every day. Clara's maid looked at her with wide eyes. "Miss?" Clara should have hidden. Instead, she went downstairs with her heart beating like a warning. He stood in the entrance hall, hat in hand, rain darkening his shoulders. Not grand. Not untouchable. Simply there. "Miss Ashbourne," he said. "Your Grace." The formality hurt more than she expected. He noticed. "You left without allowing me to speak. I thought silence would be kinder." "To whom?" Clara looked away. "To you." Something changed in his face. "Walk with me." The request was gentle. It was also impossible to refuse. They went into the garden, where rain clung to the leaves and the old paths were cracked beneath their feet. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Clara said, "You should not have come." "I disagree. People are talking. They often do. They say I trapped your attention." "Did you?" She stopped. "No." "Then we may ignore them." Clara almost laughed, but pain caught first. You can ignore them. You are a duke. I am the girl in the torn gown. Alexander turned fully toward her. No, he said. You are the woman who helped a servant when no one else moved. You are the woman who spared a countess embarrassment. You are the woman who stood in a room designed to shame her and still did not become cruel. Clara's eyes burned. Please do not make me sound better than I am. I am trying to make you hear what is true. She could not answer. Then he reached into the carriage waiting beyond the garden gate and took out a long covered box. Clara stared at it. What is that? Something returned to its rightful owner. He opened it. Inside lay the blue gown. Clara covered her mouth. It was the same gown, and not the same at all. The faded silk had been cleaned and strengthened. The torn seams were restored with delicate embroidery. Pale silver thread curved along the bodice like moonlit vines. The uneven hem had been reshaped. The cheap lace was gone. It was beautiful. Not because it looked new. Because someone had cared enough to save it. Clara whispered, "Why would you do this?" Alexander's voice lowered. Because I disliked what they tried to make it mean. She looked at him. They wanted it to prove you were lesser, he said. Unworthy. Disposable. The word struck deep. Disposable. That was exactly how she had felt. He continued, but damaged things are not worthless. Sometimes they are only waiting for someone patient enough to see what remains. Clara's tears finally fell. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to end the lie that she was untouched by any of it. Alexander did not reach for her without permission. He simply stood near enough that she no longer felt alone. I did not admire your gown that night, he said. I admired your heart. Clara touched the restored fabric with shaking fingers. For years, she had believed being overlooked meant there was nothing to see. But this man had noticed her kindness. Her effort. Her silence. Her pain. And he had not turned away. For the first time, Clara believed him. When Clara returned to society, everyone looked. That was unavoidable. But this time, she did not shrink. The gathering was smaller than the Ravensshire ball, held at Lady Marwood's town house, but every important whisper in the county had somehow received an invitation. Beatrice and Lydia arrived early. They expected Clara to stay hidden forever. When she entered, Lydia's fan stopped midair. Beatrice went pale. Clara wore the restored blue gown. The room recognized it at once. That was the power of gossip. People remembered what had amused them. But now they could not laugh. The gown moved softly around her, pale blue strengthened with silver embroidery. The repaired seams did not hide the damage, they transformed it. Every stitch seemed to say that humiliation had not won. A hush spread. Not cruel this time. Curious. Then admiring. Lady Marwood smiled from across the room as though she had been waiting for exactly this moment. Beatrice recovered first. How touching, she murmured as Clara approached. You kept the costume. Clara looked at her calmly. No. I kept the lesson. Lydia's eyes narrowed. And what lesson was that? That people often reveal themselves most clearly when they think someone else is powerless. The words were soft. They landed hard. Beatrice glanced around, frightened others had heard. They had. For once, Clara did not need to expose them. Their own fear did it. A gentleman nearby bowed to Clara. The elderly countess she had helped came forward and kissed her cheek. My dear, the countess said, you look exactly as you ought. Clara's throat tightened, but she smiled. Across the room, the Duke watched her. Not rescuing. Not intervening. simply allowing her to stand in the place she had earned. That meant more than any grand gesture. Then the music began. Every unmarried lady in the room became alert again, but with less certainty than before. They knew what had happened last time. They wondered if he would do it again. Alexander crossed the room. Beatrice held her breath. Lydia looked away, already defeated. The Duke stopped before Clara. His eyes warmed. "Miss Ashbourne." "Your Grace." A pause. The entire room leaned into it. Then he offered his hand. "May I have the first dance?" Clara remembered the first time he had asked. Her torn gown. Her shaking hands. The laughter. The shame. The desperate belief that kindness must be pity. But tonight, she felt no urge to flee. She looked at his hand. Then at his face. This time, she saw no savior and no scandal. Only a man who had chosen her when choosing her cost something. She placed her hand in his. "Yes," she said. This time, gladly. The room exhaled. As they stepped onto the floor, Beatrice whispered something bitter, but no one listened. That was her punishment. Not ruin. Not revenge. Irrelevance. During the dance, Alexander said quietly, "You are not shaking." Clara smiled. "No. But you may still be in danger of having your reputation damaged. I survived it once. And would you risk it again?" His answer came without hesitation. "For you, Miss Ashbourne, I would risk being understood." Clara laughed softly. The music turned. The crowd watched. And for once, Clara did not wonder whether she deserved to be seen. She already was.